What's going on, motivators? Got something for your mind, body, and soul today. Boy, am I excited for today's guest. I think storytelling is a huge part of who we are as human beings. In fact, I believe that storytelling is honestly part of, it's a cornerstone of human existence. It's a great unifier. It makes different people feel connected to the same overarching mission, right? As leaders, it's very important that we connect people. Storytelling brings us around the campfire. We feel included. We have a sense of comfort and warmth and inclusion. So my guest today is probably a master storyteller. I don't know if he classifies himself as that, but I definitely do. Neal Foard has 30 years of advertising experience. He's using his lessons in those 30 years to teach people how to be better persuaders, to be more persuasive. And he's on a journey to go city to city and share his experiences. If you're interested in checking him out, you can go to nealfoard.com. We're going to put that in the comments section below. I recommend you check it out. First chapter of his book is on there, so you can listen to him telling the story himself. Real quick, stick with me for 2 minutes and 34 seconds, and I want to share with you a sample of what Neal does on all his pages on social media.
When you start a small company, it might pay off, it might not. Most of them don't. I mean, we have to admit, a part of success is just blind luck, or maybe karma. An old friend of mine started a small tech company and struggled for the better part of 10 years, just managing to keep the lights on. I doubt you've heard of him. And I never thought much of the product, but hey man, what do I know? But then COVID comes along, turns the world upside down, and a couple of much larger companies created some very successful products that integrated his tech. And one of them wound up acquiring his company for a lot of money. Like so much money that he really can do anything he wants forever. And I didn't even know about it until one Saturday he asked me if I could help him move some stuff. I said, yeah, okay. And he picked me up in his old Honda that he'd been driving forever. And he looked like he'd spent the morning fixing flat tires. And I did too. I had on my refrigerator moving clothes, so it looked like I'd given up. And he says he wants to stop and get some breakfast. And we go into this little diner near his old office. We get a booth, and he says, let me do the ordering. So, okay. And this old gal comes around to take our order. And she asks what we'll have, and he says, well, whatever we can get for under $5. And she looks us over, and she says, are you boys working today? And he says, yeah. And a little while later, she brings out 2 plates of eggs and bacon and toast and juice and coffee and a muffin in a to-go bag. And he says, I don't think we can cover all that. She says, when you make it someday, you can pay me back. And we sat there eating, and that's when he told me about the money. And he told me she'd been feeding him like that all through his lean years. And today was his birthday. And it occurred to him that it didn't make sense for people to give him gifts that day, since he was the one that was so grateful for the year. And we finished our breakfast, which was really good. And he dropped an envelope on the table. And we went out to watch her open it from the Honda. And it had an ATM card and a note in it. He had opened a brokerage account for her with a lot of money in it. Like you wouldn't even call it money, you'd call it freedom. And she sat in there reading that note that he'd written. You know how they say it's better to give than to receive? It really is.
Good morning, Neal. How you doing? Welcome to Leadership Jam session. Uh-oh. Can you hear him? Can you hear him?
No.
Oh, this is my fault, Neal. Technical difficulties. I'm new at this. Go ahead.
No worries. I was going to say that what I neglected to say in that story, and it makes me mad now that I watch it again, is that I had asked him, why did you want me to dress for moving? And he said, you don't think that was moving? And I thought, oh, you son of a gun.
Yeah.
That's pretty clever.
That is.
That wasn't the last stop we made that day, by the way.
Did
We made 3 more stops.
really he
Yeah.
went around and thanked some more people?
He was paying people who I shouldn't call it paying. He was thanking people for the help that they'd given him on his way to that. And it really affects you, Sean, when you're there for that. You get a sudden craving to like go into the world and start doing things like that.
Yeah, as a command master chief, I always said I had a front row to others' success. So the captain is handing the award, they're advancing somebody, they're congratulating somebody, and you're always standing right there, and you get to be part of that story. And there's really nothing more rewarding than watching other people succeed, in my opinion. So I can imagine that type of, I mean, it is philanthropy, but that type of giving back, paying it forward, if you will, is a special moment to be part of, to be welcomed into is great.
It affects you.
Yeah. So I love storytelling. Being a sailor, we all tell sea stories. It's kind of like being a fisherman. The fish is that big. That's the one-armed fisherman joke. But we love to tell sea stories. And what I learned as a civilian is the better you are at telling stories, for example, the better you are in interviews. Because most interviews really are just telling sea stories about your success as a leader or whatever you can provide to that company. If you can tell a good story and share with them how others benefited from your work or your leadership, then the better off you are in an interview. We all love TED Talks, right? I'm a history nerd, so I study great leaders who could tell wonderful stories. Just this week, you shared one about Theodore Roosevelt, and I believe his cousin FDR was an amazing storyteller, which is kind of where I got the fireside chat idea from in my intro. JFK obviously was a great storyteller. Martin Luther King, Gandhi, Lincoln is my absolute favorite storyteller in history. But we can go as far back as Aesop and Homer and Charles Dickens and today the Dalai Lama is one of my favorite storytellers as well. So just throwing out a big list of leaders that are who have either helped change the world or are changing the world. And I think you're trying to do the same kind of thing with people, to bring that leadership out of them based on your experience. Can you share part of that journey and how it's been? Our first time talking was 2 years ago. So what's happened in those 2 years?
Well, there's a hunger and thirst out in the world for an antidote to all the negativity that our media promotes. The algorithms that run the selection of what we see in social media and what gets shared on television and online. The algorithm feeds off outrage. It promotes outrage because you'll know, Sean, that when you post a video and there's a disagreement, it creates a flood of comments. And the system regards comments as engagement. But what it really is people have figured out that if they can froth up a disagreement, it will result in engagement. But that engagement is it's a game to win points in a net negative scenario. What we really want to do is, if you're going to create engagement, the goal is, I want to engage you in such a way that we share our humanity, that we both realize, if you had a mission in life and I gave you this mission, I said, I just want you to remind people they're not alone. That's a pretty good mission. That's kind of where I'm at right now, is I want to remind people it isn't as bad as they're telling you. I know it's not as bad. This does not mean that you are not going to encounter bad people. You of all people would know there are bad guys out there. But you've also told me, for the benefit of your audience, you had experience in incarceration of enemy combatants. And what you discovered was, if you treat them like human beings, you're going to discover that they are human beings, and you're going to get a certain kind of behavior out of them that's desirable. It is the great tragedy of all wars that the very people you are out there shooting at and that are shooting at you, if there weren't the ideologies, if there wasn't the system, chances are you'd all be playing football together or drinking a beer together. And my personal experience has been that I very rarely encounter somebody who's actually a bad person. What I encounter is somebody who's having a bad day. I'll give you just a simple thing like this. I'm in a gas station on California's 5 highway. It's a big north-south artery, and when people are on it, generally they're going from one place to another. They're not using the 5, to stop off in their hometown. They're going between the Bay Area and Los Angeles, basically. And there was this, so people are in a kind of a hurry, right? They're trying to hump it about 400 miles. We're in this filling station, and it's one of those places that has a mini mart, and we're all trying to pay for gas, but there's this family of 5, and the kids are running around trying to get one more snack. And so it's one of these things where they're trying to pay the bill, but it's one more thing and one more thing and one more thing. And I can see that the mother of the family is just absolutely harried by this brood. She's trying to balance, like, no, not one more thing, but trying to also keep the line moving. So she doesn't want to engage in a big argument with the kids. I was starting to get impatient. And then I caught myself thinking, no, your job here is not to be impatient and your job is to be understanding for the situation this woman's in. I turned around to the guy behind me, and instead of being angry and frustrated and impatient, he just kind of shrugged. It was a friendly shrug, like, what are you going to do? We all had kids, right? His tiny gesture of patience was so restorative to my belief in people. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
That little thing where he had a little patience for a mom. I thought, God bless you, brother. God bless you. We're all in this together, man.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we are. Absolutely.
Everything down.
Yes.
That little thing. So you asked about my experience the past 2 years. It's been trying to be that person. And I'm finding that, holy cow, a little patience and a little understanding, it doesn't just improve their day, right? They don't have to deflect your negativity. You wind up being the big winner.
Right.
Because you're reflecting out in the world a certain kind of energy, and it comes back at you.
Well, I think that goes back to your video, right? I mean, you don't have life-changing money. You just have to have a life-changing attitude to change people's lives.
That's a fact.
If
you go out there and the videos that I do, the stories that I tell, largely they will have a moral at the end. They're a little bit like, when you were citing Homer, or Aesop. Wow. First of all, I didn't know you were a history geek, and brother, we're both right there. Birds of a feather. But when you do go back, what's cool about it is that when you go back into the Stoics or whomever, and you take these morals, these ways to live, it's fantastic to be able to say, I'm not just going to tell a story randomly. I'm going to try and leave you with a gift. If there's any rule that I'm really living by lately, it's leave things better than you found them. And let's pretend you and I worked at a news agency. And what we're going to talk about is we've got some big problem, and we're going to try and make the audience feel like that's their problem. That's not making things better. Mm-hmm. That's just whipping up panic and frenzy and anxiety and making people feel threatened. And you know what? I want to be the antidote. I want to leave things better than I found them. So the stories are largely true. And what they're about is meeting new friends and having experiences where people are generous with one another and showing a little patience. Or in the case of my last video, I got a lot of heat because the basic premise of it was, look, don't go out into the world taking pictures of your food and taking pictures of statues and making and being by the Leaning Tower of Pisa and acting like you're holding it up. Like, baby, you didn't get there first.
Okay. But most of all, you're in Pisa to see a monument. You're in Italy. How about meeting the Italians?
Right.
How about learning what it's like to actually live in Italy and
Right.
and amaze at their culture? Well, I got heat because a lot of people like taking pictures of their food. And they were blowing back at me like, food is part of culture. And I'm
Yeah.
okay, sorry.
I literally just did a video about how anger is a secondary emotion, and
I loved that
often,
video. I saw that video. That was really good.
I appreciate that. That means the world coming from you, to be honest.
Oh,
But
that was quality stuff.
I mean, but there is. It's the tip of the iceberg. When
totally
you
is.
get mad at a video that wasn't even directed at you, there's something else there.
Yeah.
Right. You have to. And my beautiful angel of a wife, it talked me through it because I get defensive about the term motivation and the difference between motivation and discipline. And I suppose it's a little defensive because the name of my page is Motivate with Is, but I spent 30 years in the military, 29 technically, and I lived on discipline. I didn't get physically fit without knowing what discipline is. Discipline's getting up on a day that you don't want to do something and getting after it. But your motivation is your why. My motivation in life is people. My motivation is I want to be healthy. I want to live a long, healthy life. That gets me in the gym because my genetics are going to take me in a different direction if I don't. So anyway, it's the whole thing for me is not about what people are doing or saying. It really, when I dig deep, I'm being defensive and I'm taking it personally, and I really don't need to.
Well,
there's no need.
I want to give a gift right now. You're doing this automatically. You're going out in the world. You're trying to spread positivity. But I do have to say, for the benefit of anybody who's watching this, the big winner, anytime you are helping support someone else, helping someone else grow, helping someone else realize their dreams, the big winner is you. And if you were nothing but a selfish douche nozzle, I still have advice to you, and that is go out and help other people. And you know what? You're the big winner.
Yeah.
Because there's all kinds of ways that's going to come back to you. The first is you're going to feel better about yourself. The second is people are going to feel better about you. And you know what? If you go back to Marcus Aurelius, I'm just paraphrasing, but essentially one of his big lessons was life gets so much easier when people like you. Right?
He wasn't wrong.
You were Master Chief. You were what Major Master Chief? What was the
Command Master Chief?
Command Master Chief. Okay.
Right.
Now people are going to think the Command Master Chief is going to be a hard-nosed son of a gun, and maybe you were, but really the role you were playing was, it is my job to bring these people along, to help them grow and be better. And I don't remember whether we were having this conversation before the recording, but I think it is worth mentioning to your guest what you said to me, which was you took such joy in when somebody would achieve advancement, you would get to stand up there while they were getting their promotion and or their citation. You would get to stand up there and share in that. And I thought, what a brilliant. This was a man who was suited to his rank. He was suited to his role. When you take pleasure in other people's advancement, brother, you are part of the solution.
Right.
This is how it's meant to be. Let's pretend, for the sake of argument, that there's going to be a final judgment day, right? And on that day, what you're going to find out is it was all about how many other people did you help? Like, pretend that was it, that we were all going to get judged on that. Wow, things would sure improve.
They would if people realized it. Well, so you touched on something. I'm going to shift just a little bit. You touched on your stories and how you create your stories. You said they're true and they always have a moral.
Yeah.
When you sit down and you do, I try to post almost daily, and you do one, maybe two a week. Where do you start? Do you start at the moral, at the lesson?
Yeah, largely.
Do you? Okay. Where do you draw from to build that story out?
I'll give you a great example. It's a story I haven't done yet, but J.K. Rowling, the woman who wrote Harry Potter and the entire series of books,
Mhm.
she had a pretty hard Scrabble existence before her book success. And she didn't publish that book until I think she was about 38. And, or no, I think it might have even been later. In any case, is she, things were tough. She didn't have a home and she was raising a child on her own. And she was, having to get public assistance because she just couldn't make enough money to make a go of it. And it strikes me that she kept banging away on that book.
Mhm.
She claims in an interview that I read that in many ways that book saved her life because it gave her something to focus on and
Mhm.
something to try to achieve. And whatever else was happening, whatever disaster was befalling, or whatever status that she felt like she lacked, because you can imagine how you'd feel if you were having to live off of public assistance and you were homeless, essentially. You can imagine how you'd feel about yourself. You'd feel pretty bad. But she had this thing that she needed to get done to have some sense of self-respect.
Mhm.
Well, the thing about that story that I just love is that was how late a start she got. And what
Mhm.
it tells me is, you know what? Even if you think you're past it or you haven't achieved enough, keep banging away at that thing because you don't know. It could be the solution for a lot of people. And famously, a lot of publishers turned that book down. Can you imagine? It's like the guy
Right.
at Decca Records that turned down the Beatles because he thought guitar music was done. Oh,
Yeah.
hey,
Hold on.
interesting.
I've got a graphic for that. Hold on a second. Here we
Do you
go.
really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the part of the story that people don't know about that guy, what they don't know about that guy is, guess the next band he signed. Can you because you know who they are. You ready? He signed the Rolling Stones. And the
Oh, wow.
reason, yeah, because he said, I'm not going to make that mistake twice.
Right. Yeah.
So he
Hey,
turned out to be a huge success because
that's right. Sometimes we're some of our failures, not our successes. And he learned his lesson the
his
first time.
failure turned out to be his crowning. That's
Right.
why he jumped on the Stones.
Huh. That's a great
That's
story.
fantastic to me. But I
Right.
just wanted to say that if you were asking how I start my stories, it goes like this. So I will hear something like, oh, J.K. Rowling didn't really get her success until she was, in her late, just about to turn 40. And I'll think to myself, wow, what's the lesson here? How can I pull that in to benefit myself?
Mhm.
And I will go in search of a quote because I love being able to construct a story heading for the punchline.
Mhm.
I'm going to
Mhm.
leave you with this thought. So I'm
Right.
going to walk backwards so that I tee that up. So
Mhm.
that's how I do it is I'll start with a premise, which is I heard this interesting fact or I had this experience. And pretty much 100% of the time, what I'm trying to leave you with is something to benefit you and something that will celebrate our better angels.
Mhm.
And although I did, like I say, I bent people's noses out of joint when I made fun of taking pictures of our food.
Heather takes pictures of food too. She wasn't
Well,
offended.
It was it's one of the few times I've gotten like a real blowback.
Really?
Like, yeah.
Well, again, I just, it's idealism, and I think we both live in that place. Is that um, I see social media as a double-edged sword,
Yeah.
and what the side that I try to sharpen often is the side that makes a difference for a positive change.
Yeah.
I could get on here and rave on and cuss and like a sailor and do the whole thing and try to motivate people that way. It's just not who I am. I maybe at one point in my life that might have been who I was, but now it's just more like I think the healthiest place for me mentally is to stay in the positive, even though it's idealist.
No.
Realistic. It's the right
Well,
place to be.
you call it idealistic. Let's just call it what it really is. Ideals are a little bit like the Constitution. look, we as a nation set down rules of all men are created equal, etc. And we should have these certain freedoms. And it takes a while before the country catches up to living those principles. So idealism is nothing more than, I don't allow yourself to criticize the idea that you're going out into the world as an idealist. What you're saying is, I intend to live by these values. And I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit for the good you're doing here. I think you feel it. I think you feel it in your soul, but you got to acknowledge it intellectually. The commons, the social media, just as you say, it's a sharp edge. It can cut or it can shape. It can, it's like fire. It's like the wheel. They're tools. If you are on the side of using it the way it is intended to be used, you're on the right side of history. You're on the side that wins eventually. You just got to keep banging away at it, because your audience is hungry and thirsty. And my compliments to whoever is listening to you, frankly, because they've made a decision about what they want to be and what they want to reflect into the universe. And I know that there are all kinds of nasty people out there, but they are so outnumbered by the good people.
Yes.
That we need to remind people those people are outnumbered. And please don't let some bad actor spoil your day. They're just so seldom. I'll give you a great example. So like I say, we're in this filling station. There could have been somebody who made a nasty remark, but I know the guy behind me would have talked him down or would have said, take it easy. It's okay. Not everything comes to sword's points.
Right.
I'll give you a great example of this. Is one of these inspiring moments of somebody who just deflated the situation. Okay, so I'm driving with a friend. The friend is an aggressive driver, a nasty piece of work. So guy cuts him off in traffic. So his reaction is road rage. So he's being a tool and he's, yelling at this guy and flipping him off and pulls up next to him. Now the guy happens to be an African-American. So he's giving him the finger. This guy rolls down his window and I'm expecting his reaction to be something like, oh, go back yourself, right? Right. Reaction. He goes, could you possibly get more upset? And I thought, you are the master. You're the Zen master Kung Fu Jiu-Jitsu. That was excellent.
Yes.
And it completely took him out of the game. The road rage deflated with great embarrassment.
Absolutely
he was embarrassed.
Yes.
And I thought, wow, brother, that was amazing. So his reaction, this kind of like, dude, relax.
Yeah, I'm sure I didn't coin this phrase. By the way, thank you very much for the compliment, and I will stick with this.
I mean that 100% sincerely,
and it means the world coming from you. It does. I told you on the phone yesterday that I'm not a celebrity worshiper by any stretch of the imagination, and you may not see yourself as a celebrity, but I've followed you for the last 2 years, and I see you that way. And I've met some pretty awesome people. You are among. Like Dennis Haysbert for me is one of my favorite people I ever met. And if you ever get the opportunity to meet him, he's a wonderful human being, and you're right there with him. And
I appreciate that.
But
my father would be happy.
Yeah. No, but I coined a phrase this week, and I know I didn't invent it, but it just popped in my head when I was talking to a couple classes at a local high school. And I told them, and when I was talking about stoicism and I was talking about forgiveness and the whole, I call it mental jujitsu. You've got to practice it, especially at a young age, to learn how to take the wind out of people's sails, to learn how to overcome a situation, because anger and frustration and payback, an eye for an eye leaves everyone blind. Yeah. So you really got to work on that. And this is coming from basically the Hulk, right? The guy who's angry all the time, right? And I have to practice it and make sure that I don't get in a place ever again in my adult life at almost 50 years old that I'm not doing that type of stuff.
Yeah, the people need to be people need to forgive themselves. Have you watched the transformation of Mike Tyson?
Yes.
Can you believe the metamorphosis and the
Yes.
journey
Amazing.
he's on?
Yes.
And to me, that is a marvelous example of a curious person who has done some things he's not proud of, who but has decided, he has made a commitment that he's going to go out into the world as a different, to have a different effect. I'm astonished I didn't like him for a long time, and only to rediscover him in his new identity and be amazed at the transformation. And that guy was there the whole time, but he had been captured by forces,
Right.
internal and external.
I think that the big thing he struggled with is what most of us struggle with is he didn't like himself.
Yeah.
And he had to find who he could truly become before he could like himself. And I believe that we could probably spend an hour talking about just that subject.
Oh, easily. And again, I want to go back to praising your audience, whoever is listening to this, because you have to feed yourself on things like this show in order to become your better self. And, it's no accident that church is weekly. You've got to keep reminding yourself to be a better person. But I can say that my own personal transformation is a kind of I am a gentler person and a smarter person, much smarter than I was 5 years ago, through the practice of trying to remind other people to be friendlier and go out of their way to do. I'm discovering I'm hearing my own words for the first time in a long time. It's astonishing to catch yourself and go, oh, yeah, I need to, I need to remember, my job is to leave things better than I found them. Did I walk into this service station? Did I leave it better than I found it? And if you actively, I have to say is that's kind of my thing now. It's like, I just focus on one thing now. I just want to leave it better than I found it. And it turns out I'm the one who wins. I'm better than I found me.
Yeah.
Boy, you can't act out of anger. Anger is a cycle. Anger is such a, oh man, what a dangerous, going to blow your own leg off. Just let yourself lose your temper.
Yeah. Been there many a times. So I got one more question. And this one was a deep thought that I wanted to ask you because I think you're a deep thinker. Through your influence, what do you hope to achieve? And then the second part of that is, what will be your requiem?
Well, I want to go back to, let's go back to your anger iceberg. Because people get angry because they are afraid or they are, well, can you break it down for your audience again? What is it again? All of the things that go into.
So when you get angry, it's a secondary emotion, and you have to actually dig into you have to actually get inside yourself. Are you afraid? Are there other emotions there? Are you afraid? Are you embarrassed? Are there other emotions? Are you dealing with other pain or other things that make you angry? Because in the end, normally, the thing that makes you angry wasn't even directed at you in the first place.
It's when couples argue over whatever they're arguing about actually isn't what they're really arguing about. It's the same thing.
Right.
Well, so you were asking, okay, well, like, what's the mission? What's the requiem? Well, what it amounts to is this: people do all the crazy and stupid and anger-filled and or nasty things that they do out of insecurity and fear. And so if I could do anything, I want to remind people they're not alone. And you don't have to impress us. I'll accept you without being, without having $1 billion. Why are you so intent on driving that $300,000 car. What does that gain you except jealousy? And what are you trying to do that for? Do you think that the only way you can gain acceptance is by hoarding resources to yourself and victimizing other people? Or would you just acknowledge that, look, we're all in this, we're in this together, okay? Your job isn't to make other people feel badly about themselves because you're scared, because you're insecure. The number one way to find real satisfaction, to cure that ill of insecurity, is to just just recognize that there's no reason to judge other people because we're subject to the same. You just wish. I'm bouncing around here, but I do want to remind people of one thing. If you want a guide for living, I found this the other day. It was something that I had lost track of for 40 years and more. It's the Boy Scout Handbook. You know why? Because you can teach someone to be a brilliant person off of just the first 20% of this book. And were you ever a scout?
I was not. Well, for about 2 weeks, I was a Cub Scout.
Okay. Well, how much time do we have? I don't want to blow your time.
There is no time limit. Let's just keep talking.
Okay. The Boy Scout Handbook, they have an oath and they've got a promise and all this stuff, right? The number one thing that the Boy Scouts were founded on, no kidding, was do a good deed daily. The whole reason there is a Boy Scouts of America is literally from this incident. There was an American businessman in London. London is a maze. It's a swerving. It's not a grid.
Right.
So it's tough to find your way around London.
Mm-hmm.
And he was lost. And this young man comes up to him, maybe about 11 or 12 years old, and says, "Excuse me, sir, you look lost. May I help you?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm trying to find such and such." And the kid says, "Well, it would be very difficult to explain how to get there. May I accompany you?" So the guy's, "Sure, fantastic." So he takes him several blocks out of his way, and he says, "Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Let me give you some money as a reward." And the kid says, "Nope, that's okay." And he says, "No, please. Look, don't be modest. Let me give you some money." And he says, "No, sir. I'm a Boy Scout, and I'm expected to do a good deed every day." So this guy goes, "You're a what?" Because he never heard of this. "I'm a Boy Scout." So that American businessman then goes to find out about the English Boy Scouts, and he says, "I'm going to bring this back to America. We need this in America." The founding of the Boy Scouts was that businessman, based off of do a good deed daily. Now, there are other parts of the motto, be prepared. That's the motto, which is a fantastic, that's a Master Chief's slogan if I've ever heard one. Be prepared. But
that's fact.
Here are the Boy Scout law is a Boy Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. If that was all I gave you as an owner's manual to go out into the world, do a good deed daily, be prepared for anything, basically, and be those things: trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. If that's all I gave you and said you must live by these principles, we would be a country of Teddy Roosevelts.
Yeah.
And just the first five: trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, and courteous. So I am certainly going to do a story about that, but I cannot help thinking that our public discourse, it's almost like, all right, before you go on network TV tonight, you must promise me you are going to be these things. And anytime you feel yourself slipping, we're going to electric shock you. We would have a very different world. So what is the requiem I'm hoping for? It is that he lived up to the Boy Scout ideal. That's what I'm hoping for.
I didn't expect that answer, to be honest with you. I didn't know we were going to go down the Boy Scout route, and I love it. I absolutely love it. The one thing I do regret, and I watched a lot of folks achieve Eagle Scout, and those that came into the military who were Eagle Scouts, you could tell a difference
Yeah.
in those people because of the way it takes a village, and their village becomes a little bit different because they're involved in something bigger than themselves before they join the military. So they have a totally different view already. It doesn't have to be taught or ingrained in them. They were definitely different people.
Scouts, scouting, particularly in the inner city, is a tremendous, because it gets you out into the wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
It gets you outside and circumstance, and it teaches you, a kind of brotherhood, and let's face it, how bull elephants will keep the rest of the elephants in line. Like they'll teach the young male elephants what it is to be a good elephant.
Mm-hmm.
And the Scouts for me was older boys teaching the younger boys how to be a good guy. And it was astonishing to watch, you in those early years when you were a Boy Scout and you're like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and you're watching older boys model what it is to be a good dude. It definitely has an impact. You've got to give kids a chance to be among their peer group in a way where they see admirable figures.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to find it. Young men are going to find role models. And if you don't provide them with the right role models, they'll find the wrong role models.
That's a fact. Sports for me in high school, especially, that was
Teamwork.
and I got my son involved in the same. I learned a lot from it, and coaching
young women in particular need to be part of a team. Like my daughter was a figure skater in North Jersey. She was quite a good one. I lamented the fact that she was not, a team sport person. She played soccer, but it was never one of those things where she was part of a championship team, and you had to, you were mentioning before about the discipline that you have to have. You got to get up on the days you don't want to get up.
Right.
Well, the beauty of sports is it provides you with that. Yeah, but they're counting on you. So whatever frailties you might have for your own motivation, there are a lot of people just would rather die than let their teammates down.
Right. And that definitely translates into the military,
Yeah.
Literally, not just figuratively.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So I always give the last word to the guest. Anything that you want to add that we didn't cover in the last?
Yeah, I as long as we're sort of, I'm coming in as a kind of storyteller, so I thought maybe it might be useful to give your crew a couple of tips about telling
please.
Stories. The one thing is, it's permissible to always put yourself at the center of a story, one that you participated in, but never cast yourself as the hero of the story. It's very off-putting when somebody brags about themselves. There's this great quote from George Orwell where he says, "No autobiography is to be trusted unless it reveals something disgraceful, because any life when lived from the inside is really nothing more than a matter of defeats." And so anyone who casts themselves as a winner is probably exaggerating or outright lying. And when you are telling a story, it is always best to be the observer of events rather than the one who triumphs in the end. And if you do in a story that you tell, in fact, succeed, then it should be the result of someone helping you or some lesson that you learned the hard way. Because what you want most of all is for your audience to be able to stand next to you in the story, not look up at you, because that will only invite rocks or disbelief. And if I told a story about my sister Lily in a savings and loan in 1977, and I recalled the events of this story as I remembered them. And then when I told the story, I asked my sister Lily if she remembered any other details. And she said, well, I'll tell you one detail. That's not how that happened. And I thought, oh, what? And then she described a series of things that didn't match her recollection. So why do I call attention to that? Just that oftentimes when we tell a story, you're not necessarily getting it right. And so when you are casting yourself as the hero, I'm going to guess about 80% of the time, that isn't quite how that went down. So it's perfectly permissible to tell a story where you are there and where you are the chief observer, but it is a bad idea to be the triumphal Caesar at the end of your story. That's one
good.
thing.
That's
and
good.
Then another thing is, when you are telling a story, have the destination in mind. What is the purpose? What reaction do you want? What are you hoping to achieve? I'll give you an example of what would happen typically with teenage boys. They will tell a story and one of their friends is the butt of the joke. Like, they will tell the story deliberately to belittle somebody. That will only earn you revenge in the end. Somebody is going to be walking around obsessed with getting it back. And is that really how you want to live your life, with a target on your back that you may not even be aware of? If you are not going through life trying to enrich or uplift other people through your stories, you are going to earn, what's the word? It's like karma is going to give you a high five to the face with a chair.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. Don't belittle anybody with a story.
Yeah, that's
and I violated my own rule with that taking pictures of food, right? Because I was laughing.
Yeah, I guess so.
Like, you know what, Neal? That was dumb.
Huh. That's a good point. Self-reflection is growth, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. Well, at least, okay. All right. Busted.
Yeah. Well, hang out. I'm going to go solo here for a second. And it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. So hang out. I want to talk to you some more after we hang up here. So, motivators, that was an awesome 40-some minute conversation with a great storyteller and a great man. And so I think the lesson that I took away is it's okay with being an idealist and changing your world one day at a time, maybe one person at a time, and start with that one person. That's you. So love you, mean it, get out, motivate. Have a great weekend.